Hello, and welcome to the Graphic Novels and Comics Roundtable's webinar on What About Crowdfunded Comics? This webinar is presented by Mara Thacker, who is the South Asian Studies and Global Popular Culture Librarian at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. As an associate professor, she has cultivated a research agenda on trends in areas of area studies librarianship with a focus on distinctive collections, especially international comics and public engagement. Mara's work to build and market one of the largest collections of South Asian comics in the North American Research Library contributed to her receiving the Library Journal's Movers and Shakers Award of 2017. Mara is also one of the founders and editors-in-chief of the Journal of Library and Outreach Engagement. Mara is currently serving as the president of the Comic Studies Society Research Librarians cohort. With us today is also Matthew Murray, a data librarian with the Center for Research Data and Digital Scholarship at the University of Colorado Boulder Libraries. He is also the co-host of the Book Clubs for Masochists, a reader's advisory podcast, and editor of the zines Catalogs and Cardigans, a library RPG zine, and Two-Fisted Library Stories. His research interests include non-traditional scholarship and developing better ways to share and support research data. Matthew and Mara co-authored a book chapter titled What About Crowdfunded Comics, which was published by the Association of College and Research Libraries in the collection it is titled Comic Books, Special Collections, and the Academic Library, which came out late last year. Please input your questions for this presentation in the Q&A box or the chat. I will be monitoring that to give to our presenters at the end of this presentation. Otherwise, take it away, Matthew and Mara.
Thank you. So let's talk about first, what is crowdfunding? What do we mean when we talk about crowdfunding? So the two main types of crowdfunding that I'm going to talk about today are project-based, which is when people pledge to give one-time financial support to a thing, a comic, a game, a movie, a concept, etc., that does not currently exist in that form. And the pledge often is only collected if the project reaches its financial goal. There's also no guarantee that thing will ever get made or released, even if the project is successful. The other type is ongoing, which is when people pledge monthly or recurring, for example, every video released, support to an individual or group. Content is often released for free to everyone on other platforms, though maybe time delayed. So someone might say, I'm going to pledge to this creator. Every time they put up a video on YouTube, they will get a certain amount of money from me, but everybody can view that. So let's talk about comics and crowdfunding next, because that is what we're all here to find out about. So project-based crowdfunding for comics has been very successful on various crowdfunding sites. It is the most successful in terms of percentage of projects funded on Kickstarter, and that 67% of comics projects on Kickstarter have been successful when the average is only 41.71%. And this has actually increased since our book chapter originally was, since the book chapter was written. Back then it was 62%, now it's 67%. So it's only going up, which is kind of wild to consider. At one point, back in 2012, some publications listed Kickstarter as the fourth most successful comics publisher in terms of total money earned when looking at how much money it was bringing in. And there's various quibbles you can have with that, but it is very successful in terms of the number of different comics projects that are being published through using this as a platform. And this is just one platform. Ongoing crowdfunding, often things like Patreon. Some creators have found success doing this, comics creators. However, when you're looking at things like comics on Patreon and other similar sites, not everyone listed is a comics creator. So for example, this one, number 3 on this list, is an app to make reading pirated comics easier. They don't specifically say that it's for pirated comics, but if you kind of read between the lines, it's pretty obvious that this is people who are willing to pay for an app to read comics, but are not willing to pay for the actual comics. Anyway, some ongoing projects also work as subscriptions to physical comics. So you might subscribe to a creator on Patreon, and then every month or however often it is, you'll get a physical comic, which I think is an interesting thing. So here's a couple of examples of these. I cannot vouch for the quality of these. I'm just saying that these are ones where you can subscribe to a creator on this platform, and they will mail you a print copy of the actual comic in question. There's other things that you may or may not consider as crowdfunding. So crowdfunding projects are usually, though not always, on dedicated crowdfunding sites. But some established publishers have subscriptions that are similar to Patreon and that you pay a flat fee every month to receive what they publish. Does this count as crowdfunding? I don't know. You also have creators and publishers and things that just have things like, hey, send us some money on PayPal so that we can publish this thing. And that can also be seen as a form of crowdfunding, though not one that has a specific crowdfunding project page associated with it on a platform. So why are comics successful on crowdfunding sites? I think, when you're looking at how much more successful they are in terms of in terms of the percentage of projects that are successfully funded, that's an interesting question to ask. So I think there's a number of reasons why this is. And you'll see on the right here that comics do not have the most successfully funded projects, but they have the highest percentage of successfully funded projects. And they definitely don't have the highest number of very well-funded projects. So you're going to see fewer 100,000 and higher projects funded compared to a category like games. But whereas comics have 67% of projects in Kickstarter are funded, only 50% of games projects are funded. So that's a sizable difference, I think, there. So why are they successful? I think they're cheap to produce. So you have a lot more low funded projects. They don't require that much. There are established printing and distribution systems already in place. Who the publishers are, the printers that you can use to publish comics. They don't take that long to physically manufacture. When you're looking at something like a game or a movie, it can take years to produce. But hopefully, fingers crossed, the comics can take a lot less time to physically manufacture and distribute. Often they're from known creators that have a track record of creating comics, whether they're not on crowdfunding sites. You also have print editions of popular webcomics. And so people know exactly what they're getting. They're like, I've already read this comic. And so I just want to have a bound physical copy of it. And then there's also a history of support for self-publishing within the comics community. There is a long history of self-publishing comics within in America. And there's a lack of stigma surrounding self-publishing in the comics world. Whereas traditionally and historically within like prose fiction publishing, self-publishing was often seen as similar to vanity publishing or not of good quality. But in comics, this has not been the case. And there are successful titles, including Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Bone, and American-Born Chinese, that were all originally self-published and were successful in that form before going off and to be published in other places as well. So you can see that just because within the comics world, there is not being any stigma surrounding the idea of self-publishing. And so I think that's one of the reasons that crowdfunding has been more popular for comics. Now let's talk a little bit about the different platforms that are being used for crowdfunding comics projects. Kickstarter is the one that you almost assuredly have heard of already. Back in 2021, they announced that they were going to pivot to blockchain. This caused a lot of unhappiness among users and creators and caused a number of competing crowdfunding services to launch. Some creators that had used Kickstarter previously also moved to new or existing platforms. However, Kickstarter seems to have moved past this pivot to blockchain, and even though they have not officially announced that they're not doing it anymore, they do not seem to be doing it anymore. They've changed the people that are in charge of the company, and they're definitely minimizing the idea that they're doing this. This is really all due to capitalism, but you probably knew that already. So Kickstarter is, I would still say, the largest crowdfunding platform for comics, but there are a lot of others as well. Indiegogo is actually predates Kickstarter as a crowdfunding site, and it is interesting that it offers fixed and flexible campaigns. So this means that flexible funding means that projects do not need to hit their targets and creators keep any funds raised. So in this case, if a project is saying, oh, we need $10,000, but they only raise 9,000, if they chose flexible funding, it means that they're going to get that money anyway. Now, this can cause problems when you are looking for projects to back, because you might say, okay, we're willing to pay $30 to this thing. It doesn't reach its goal, and then the creator gets the money, but because they didn't hit their goal, maybe they'll publish it, maybe they won't. So that's a problem with, any of these projects. You never really know what's going to happen with things. Zoop is a newer crowdfunding platform that is only for comics projects. And I think Zoop is interesting because it functions more like a publisher than a crowdfunding platform in a few ways. It provides production, printing, shipping, and other types of support to the creators that use it. And they also have some amount of approval and review required for projects to be launched. So anyone can pitch a project to them, but they don't accept every project that's there. And they have certain requirements for that, whereas anyone can create a project on Kickstarter or Indiegogo or other platforms. But like the other platforms, this is limited. It's like they have to reach their funding goal or they won't get produced. So there are many, many other crowdfunding sites out there. There is Crowdfunder, BackerKit, Fund My Comic are some of the general ones, but there's also specific projects like the Final Space one, which is a website and pre-order crowdfunding website that's created only for one title. This is the only thing. It was produced specifically for this comic. That's the only one that you can order from it. And once it's over, it'll go away. So it's just that one comic. And then you have one from Unbound, which is a more traditional publisher, but they're crowdfunding their works that they're putting out. So you kind of know exactly what you're getting. They have established publishing like experience and things like that, but they're making sure that these things are crowdfunded before they actually publish them. So there are many different things and many different publishers and sites and platforms that are used for crowdfunding, and it can be hard to keep track of all of them. And there's always new ones coming up as well. So there's also other countries and languages, and depending on the sort of collection you're trying to build in your library, this can be really important. So Spaceman is one that is based out of Spain, and then Ululi is based out of France, although both of them have projects in other places as well. And so these are some of the major European crowdfunding platforms that are used for comics. They're used in multiple countries throughout Europe and probably other countries as well. But if you're looking for those sorts of comics, there's some stuff that you'll only be able to get on these platforms. They do have English versions of the websites, but just because the website itself is available in English does not mean that the project will be available in English. So it can be tricky to figure out exactly what you're purchasing if you're not fluent in the languages that are being used there. So we mentioned at the beginning of this that there was a book chapter that was released, and that was based on a research project that we did. So now I'll talk about the research project. So we did a survey that was approved by the University of Illinois Institutional Review Board. We sent this out in late 2020. We had 22 questions. Only the first 7 questions were asked of all participants. Question 7 was whether the library acquired comics through crowdfunding platforms. And if they said no, they didn't have to answer any other questions. And we had 51 different institutions that responded to this. We had 34 public libraries, 9 private academic libraries, 7 public academic libraries, and 1 school library. The majority of these were all based in the USA. And of those, we had 46 institutions that said they do not acquire comics from crowdfunding platforms and 5 institutions that do acquire comics from crowdfunding platforms. Considering this was a survey about crowdfunded comics and library collections, we think that it's probably higher than 90% of libraries that do not collect these, because how many libraries that don't collect them are going to bother filling out a survey about whether their library collects them? If they don't, most of them will just be like, well, we don't collect those, so I'm not going to bother filling out the survey. So the fact that we got 46 institutions that responded to your survey, I think is great in that we got those respondents, but also, I think it's not a lot of libraries collect these at all, is really the result of the survey. So why don't libraries acquire comics from crowdfunding sites? This was also within the survey. We asked this, and here are some of the responses that we got. Libraries can't evaluate the comics. This was a big one. Reviews play a large role in our judgment of which materials we should spend our limited funds on. And there are no reviews of a lot of this material. Generally, if they haven't been printed before, they've only been webcomics or whatever, you're not going to find reviews of the comic at all. And you're definitely not going to find a review of this specific edition of the comic. We don't have any policies against these purchases, although we recommend choosing books based on published reviews. Published reviews are even rarer, especially if you're looking for something in, an established journal, established thing like Library Journal or Book List or things like that. They're not going to have a review of a crowdfunded project that has not been released yet. And someone would have to get advanced copies to look over. So, to establish, is this quality of the actual publication, is it any good to see if we should back it, which again is not something that can happen. The next issue is that libraries can't purchase the comics. Say a library said, yes, this is one that we want to add to our collection. They run into more challenges. You need a credit card to use these sites. You can't just purchase them in other ways. The purchase time versus shipping and receiving time and the financial year can also be very challenging for libraries. Some libraries are like, if we cannot get it if we do not get it within the specific financial year because of budgets. So if you order it and it does not show up in time, then it can cause problems. Collection policies and processes are incompatible with crowdfunding sites. So some libraries say they have to use specific vendors and things like that. And that ties into the next one, which is that a lot of libraries requirement for invoices. And so they cannot just purchase something. They have to send an invoice to the publisher or the vendor who sends back the costs and things like that. And that you're not going to get that on a crowdfunding site, especially not one where the project is done by like one person probably. And then also there's no money in the budget. So you have specific budget items in lines in your budget for different things, and there's nothing specifically for crowdfunded comics when you're already potentially purchasing comics from other sources. Some solutions to these that were suggested are institutional credit cards. Some folks already have these for purchasing things from sites like Amazon and eBay. Donations of material to libraries from crowdfunding projects. I'll talk about that a little bit later. And then one solution is that library employees purchase the comics and donate them to the library. Please do not do this. Even though I think multiple people said they do this, we do not get paid enough to fund our library collections ourselves. The next problem is that libraries can't catalog the comics. So even if they've successfully navigated the first two problems, once they get the comics in hand, they cause additional problems. My comics cataloger often find it challenging to catalog crowdsourced comics as they often lack traditional bib data like publication date, location, and/or publishing name. Metadata, there is no metadata. Traditional cataloging has not caught up to virtual publishing houses, and comics creators tend to be twee types who list a cloud on Jupiter's moon as their birthplace in their bios and use unreadable fonts for their names on their pieces. So getting concrete answers for things like publisher or place of publication or publishing copyright date winds up being a combination of lots of Googling and some guessing. Because these are often published by people that do not have experience publishing things, they may not even include some of this information like copyright dates that we think should be in every book, but because these are not being published through traditional methods, they may not include this information. You might not find author names, page numbers, publication locations, any of that information. And the other challenge is that there's no copy cataloging because nobody else owns these comics. So you must do original cataloging within in-house. And that can also be a challenge because that means that additional time needs to be spent on cataloging these comics. Other criticisms, and these are more kind of general ones for crowdfunding projects in general and comics projects, and not library specific, but that projects are pre-orders from established publishers. This can be a challenge. Do you pre a lot of the most successful crowdfunding projects are ones that are from established comics publishers and are not from individuals. And so you have to know whether this is something that you'll be able to buy later on. So you can see here this list of the top 6 funded in terms of money. On Kickstarter, you have G.I. Joe, which is published by Skybound, which is part of Image Comics. You have Berserker and The Expanse, both of which are from Boom Studios. So those are established comics publishers already. Those comics are getting published regardless of whether or not these crowdfunding projects were successful, whether they put these crowdfunding projects up on the first place, but they're offering them as an alternative for other people to purchase these things so they didn't have to go to a comic shop or whatever it happens to be. But you will be able to purchase these items generally from other vendors later on. FOMO, fear of missing out, you are limited in how long you have to purchase these. And so it can be very challenging in knowing, should I buy this, should I not? Well, you've got 30 days maximum before you can decide whether you want to get it or not. Projects that don't deliver and fraudulent projects, there's always going to be some percentage of these projects that never ship things or ship things years late or ship things of not exactly what you expected to get. And you don't know when that's going to happen or not. The lack of digital options. Digital options are often available as part of these crowdfunding projects, but they are not available in ways that work for libraries. You're going to get emailed a PDF probably is the digital option, and you're not going to be able to share that within your library collections. And then there's no assurance of quality. This may or may not be something that's produced yet, and maybe it'll be good or maybe it'll be terrible, and you don't necessarily know that. And especially when you don't have reviews or anything to look at, that can be a problem with this stuff. Another challenge is that information is often locked within images. So many crowdfunding projects have much of the project information, such as stretch goals, locked inside images. Here's an example on the right. All these stretch goals, those are all pictures. You cannot search this text. There's no text version of this information available on the page. So you have to read through the entire project page, which can cause a lot of more time. When you have limited time to do this sort of thing and you're looking at a lot of different projects, this is not great. When you really just want to do Control F and search for like hardcover or something like that, you actually have to go through and read all of this. So that is another challenge of looking at these. Exclusive content. So some projects from publishers include stretch goals that include material unavailable anywhere else. So this is for the Giant Days Kickstarter. Giant Days is a comic that was published by Boom. The Kickstarter was done by Boom. And you could purchase the majority of the items from this through any vendor afterwards. But this one stretch goal, a Charlotte a one-shot comic, is said by the author of this, you will never find a copy. It was only produced as a stretch goal for this. You cannot purchase it any other way. There are probably just a couple hundred copies of this around in the world. Who knows exactly how many? But if you are collecting, this means that even if you're like, okay, we will be able to get this material later on, maybe you won't be able to get it all later on, even though the majority of it will. And so that's a problem with some of these things as well. Library donations. So some crowdfunding projects have tiers that donate copies to a library, usually a library of the donator's choice, but very few, or maybe even none of these, are aware that many libraries will not accept donations. So they'll say things like, tell us what library you want this to be shipped to, and without knowing that a lot of libraries will not accept donations, or if they do accept donations, there's no guarantee that those donations will be added to their collection. And so I hope that more publishers and creators using crowdfunding sites realize this. I'm doing my best to educate them whenever I see this come up, and I encourage you to do the same. Just because they don't we don't want them to be promising that these comics will end up in libraries when they cannot actually do that based on the library's acquisition policies. Some projects do allow libraries to apply to receive free copies, which is probably the better way of doing this. Instead of saying this will definitely go to the library of your choice, it's saying it will go to a library, and then libraries can say, please send us a copy of this. I think that is the better option for doing this, though you don't always see that. So this all seems really hard. Why should libraries collect crowdfunded comics? There's a lot of barriers. There's a lot of issues. So why should we be doing this? And really, there's a few reasons. There's topics and creators not represented by mainstream media and publishers. There's a lot of comics by members of marginalized communities, queer comics creators, Black, Indigenous, and people of color comics creators, comics by members of by creators who are disabled. All of those are ones that you frequently find in crowdfunding sites, and you will not find those comics anywhere else. You will not find comics produced by those sorts of people anywhere else as well, or much harder to find those. You often find comics covering niche topics and from different viewpoints. Complete national collections. I recently saw someone saying, oh, the Library of Congress, they have a copy of every book published in America, right? And I'm like, well, no, because they don't have things from crowdfunding sites, because crowdfunders are not sending copies of their books, of their titles or their comics to the Library of Congress, maybe in some cases, and then support specific programs and special collections. And so if you have a collection, whether that's, we have a great collection of comics about cooking or comics by queer creators or whatever it happens to be, if you want that to be as complete a collection as possible, you need to be looking at crowdfunding comic sites, because there's a lot of stuff that's released on these places that you will not find anywhere else. You're not going to be able to purchase it through your vendors or anything else. And so if you want to have a good, complete collection of certain types of titles, you need to be looking at these sites.
Okay, so now I will jump in, and essentially after Matthew and I did our research project, pretty much 1 year later, partially I think based on Matthew and I presented it at a library research showcase, and we were talking about how these crowdfunded comics are undercollected and why you should collect them. And my cataloging and acquisitions colleagues are really wonderful people, and they were like, well, we could maybe figure out a way to make this happen. And so 1 year later, we piloted the program. And next slide. Um, we can say that the University of Illinois has a crowdfunded comics collection. So it's been going on this is our 3rd year of dedicated collecting. We have more than 125 Kickstarter comics available in our catalog. We have backed a lot more projects than that, but as you may guess from some of the previous research, the need for original copy cataloging, the unpredictable delivery times, sometimes there can be a bit of a lag between the time when you get excited about a project and the time it's actually on the shelves. One thing I will point out about the images that we have on the screen, the screenshots, we do make it really easy to find out which crowdfunded comics we have. Our cataloger, shout out to Rosemary Tripp, adds a note in all of them about the Kickstarter campaign, and there's usually a link so you can go back and find it, assuming the link isn't broken. So a couple years in, we have a proof of concept that the process is sustainable. I will have some caveats on that maybe later. We have extremely detailed documentation that we use to maintain the collection. We have local buy-in from library administration and technical services colleagues, which is really important. And of course, support from the in-house cataloger. So these things were all kind of critical underpinnings. And next slide. So the first question you might be thinking is how we decide what to order. As you saw, there were tens of thousands of comics projects at any given time that might be available. So one of the first things we did was kind of set up a vision. So the vision was to address the gap in the national collection and complement our growing emphasis on building diverse and inclusive collections. So the initial target was to identify projects with international, BIPOC, LGBTQIA+, and creators with disabilities. My graduate student at the time when I started this collection developed a spreadsheet that he could use to suggest projects. He would kind of comb through them and include details that we could use to make faster ordering decisions. So links to the project, the price, whether we might want any add-ons, a rationale for the tier, and the probability of being funded, which ends up being somewhat important, and then a automatic tracker that tells you how many days are left in a campaign. Some of this is maybe not as necessary now, but when we were first starting out the project, it was really work intensive. So having a way to kind of streamline decision making, at least on my behalf, was really useful. So far we are still using that. And I have a student this year who checks the different crowdfunding sites. We still do primarily Kickstarter, but we've also ordered from Zoop and BackerKit and some of the other things. And we are interested in international content. So hopefully we'll be able to start looking at Spaceman and ULA and other things like that soon. Next slide. So some additional notes on the decision-making criteria, some things that have just come up based on experience. We were emphasizing creators from historically marginalized backgrounds, but we're also interested in stories that center on those experiences. So sometimes we've come into some situations where it might be a white creator who's telling a story centered on a BIPOC experience. So we kind of have to go through and look at other metrics to make that decision. The how likely is it to be funded? I mean, we work with a third-party vendor. There's a article, we give the citation at the end in art libraries that gives that person's name, but if you need a vendor to work with, Jeffrey Hill of CD Source is great. I'd be happy if you want to email me to connect you with him. So he doesn't charge us if we ask for him to back a project and it doesn't get funded, because he doesn't get charged. But if you're keeping kind of a recurring sort of mental idea of how much of your budget you're spending, and that can add a layer of complication in figuring out how much you've spent. How expensive is it relative to what you get? I saw a recent campaign that wanted the $100 for two like 26 issue comics, and that's not really a great value for per page. And so you kind of have to ask yourself, what is it that makes it worth this much? Is this a creator we've supported in the past, and do we want to have continuity? If we've supported them in the past and the project was high quality, then oh, I'm seeing Matthew's note, sorry. If we've supported them in the past and it was high quality, we likely want to support them again. Sometimes we look at if it's the creator's first project, do they support other comics projects? We like people who are, good members of the community. It's not always a make or break, but I have seen some where the creator mentions that this is their first project, and so they may expect some bumps in the road. Maybe you want to wait until they have a little more proof of concept. We consider whether there's any, for the ones that are web or digital comics being, made into physical editions, did they win any awards? Are they on any reading lists? Is it really, really obviously going to be published by a mainstream publisher later? If so, maybe we just want to wait for that and then skip the whole rigmarole of making a bet on when we're going to get it. Is it a Kickstarter projects we love? Sometimes that might be a tipping point on a decision. Maybe there's a reason why we should really pay attention to it. So those are some additional kind of criteria I think about when I'm assessing whether we want to order something or not. Next slide. So to kind of return to a little bit of an earlier topic of what do we do with these things? So when we get the physical comics, we of course catalog them. We have a note in the catalog record that they're from Kickstarter, Zoop, or whatever that links back to the campaign if possible. We've tried to do blog posts and different things to kind of promote their use. The digital rewards, unfortunately, we don't have a good answer. And by the way, for those of you wanting our vendor's email address, it's right there. At this point, he just forwards the PDFs and sends me the digital rewards, and they are literally sitting in a folder called Kickstarter PDFs. I don't know what to do with them. They are under copyright. I don't feel comfortable distributing them, but I also don't want to throw them away because we paid for them. So that is still a thing to grapple with. Next slide. So some of the challenges that we've come across, and again, this is really just reinforcing some of what the research was already showing us. The variability of final products in terms of quality and delivery time. One example that I've talked about before, because we have also gotten crowdfunded games, is we thought we were ordering a game, but what instead came in was a unassembled game, including minis that would have required painting and gluing, and then primarily a comic. And our technical services people were like, you said this is going to the game collection, but what do you want to do with this? And who's going to put together and paint these minis? And so you don't always know what you're going to get with the ephemera and bonus content. Like we get stickers and things like that right now. They often, but not always, get sent to me, and I keep them in my office to have as little giveaways if I have an event or anything. Encumbered funds on unsuccessful projects, and mostly these would be encumbered if the campaign was successful, but they might not have actually delivered what they said they would. So that creates a little bit of confusion for tracking plus disappointment. Tracking all of these kinds of costs with the third-party vendor, it's not always clear exactly how much the upcharge is. I'll say Jeffrey has been really cool. Like, in fact, our acquisitions people think that maybe he should be charging us more. So I don't know how they're tracking that. So far, I haven't run afoul of anything budgetarily. Establishing continuity with previously funded creators. Sometimes we might miss a project if we didn't know that we did something, or this relates to the next one, unexpected cancellations for oversubscribed tiers. We just had, literally this morning, I got a message that a project we had funded, the campaign manager had canceled it and said the tier was oversubscribed. It was for a project we had previously backed, and I was really disappointed because we only had the one pictured Ruka, and there's 3 others in the La Brava series. Fortunately, our vendor reached out and kind of explained why we were particularly interested, and apparently they worked it out. I also reached out at the same time, so reach out to these Kickstarter creators. Sometimes they are able to work with you. The ongoing evolution of the crowdfunding space, as you've seen from the tracker, it can be work intensive to even follow Kickstarter. When you start adding 2, 3, 4, 5 other websites, that's a lot more work. And then budgeting, we don't always have advance notice that a project is forthcoming. Campaigns might have a short window. I think I've seen some that were like as short as a week, and then if you miss it, you miss it potentially. So those are some of the challenges. Next slide. But there's lots of other opportunities and good things too. So the University of Illinois is not the only place that collects crowdfunded comics. Around the time we started our collection, Ohio State University, the Billy Ireland, started collecting crowdfunded comics. Jenny has talked about they're particularly interested in comics, I believe, by Indigenous creators. So that's a real area of emphasis for them. And then the comic studies librarian at Michigan State University, who is the person who helped me with the pilot project and really was instrumental in getting the Illinois project started, is also, of course, sold on how important they are. And MSU will be collecting crowdfunded comics as well. There are some other institutions, I'm not going to name names, but we were curious and asked my vendor if anyone else has taken him up on the opportunity to buy crowdfunded materials, and he's reported that 2 other universities have. We still need to figure out assessment and usage stats. I mean, on the one hand, for long tail collections, it's not necessarily important that they be high use, but we do want to make sure that people know we have them and that they're available for research and we're getting them into the hands of readers. We still need to figure out, I guess it's an opportunity, how to circulate or share these PDFs. So that could happen at some point. We want to get crowdfunded materials incorporated in instruction and outreach, and then branching out into other crowdfunded platforms. That's another future opportunity. Next slide. A little bit of a note on privilege. So the pilot of the project was developed with Jason Larson from Michigan State University. It really benefited from his knowledge of the crowdfunded comic space. It's not why I hired him, but we talked about it a lot in the job interview, and I don't know where we would have been if I hadn't had somebody so knowledgeable and detail oriented to develop the project and get the documentation going. I was actually on sabbatical last year, and the documentation that he developed allowed that project to continue even without me overseeing it, which I cannot emphasize enough what a big deal that is, because some of these kinds of detail oriented projects, that's a big ask for a colleague who's watching on sabbatical, but it enabled that to continue. It does take time and financial resources to maintain the collection, even with having graduate student assistants to kind of help comb through the pages. It takes time, and I still have to review those things and figure out how that fits in with my budget for my other collecting priorities. Having a good relationship with a flexible vendor is critical. And again, we've been really lucky that Jeffrey has been so kind in how he works with us. And having cataloging support is also critical. We're really lucky that we have Rosemary Tripp, who does original cataloging, who has a deep knowledge of the comic space and has even led workshops on our campus to help other catalogers understand the intricacies of cataloging these kinds of materials. All of that said, because I'm in the relatively privileged position of being at the University of Illinois and having these colleagues and resources available, it is sustainable. Do not tell the powers that be, but if for some reason I lost my graduate student, I could maintain this project myself, but I don't want to say easily, this is being recorded. But anyway, it is sustainable in our context, and I do think that it would be adaptable and applicable for other universities as well. I think there are different ways to scale the project. Next slide. So some tips if you are sold and you want to start your own crowdfunded collection. First is to carefully define your scope. So what aligns with your existing collection priorities, as well as might fill a gap in the national collection. Another question you will probably have to ask yourself if you start buying these materials is how you define things like obscenity. There are a lot of quirky publications out there that get kind of front loaded in the crowdfunding space that are labeled helpfully as not safe for work. And it is up to you to decide whether it fits in with your collection scope, or if it's porn, or if you collect porn. That's something that we've had to think about. Generally, we're like, if it has some sort of educational component or represents a underrepresented aspect of sexuality or something like that, but it's kind of like the Supreme Court, you know it when you see it. If you are targeting comics that promote DEIA, are you amplifying historically marginalized creators versus content with historically marginalized characters, or both? That's something to think about in advance. Working with your technical services to make sure you have an action plan for cataloging, especially if original cataloging is likely going to be required. Figure out your approximate budget and roughly how many you could get on a monthly basis based on that budget, because of course this is something that you have to keep monitoring over time. Develop documentation for how you manage your ordering processes. Maybe you don't need a detailed spreadsheet to the level that we have, but you might want something that lets you know why you chose it and helps you look back on which projects and creators you funded in the past for the continuity. Track fulfillment and use of the collection. We have a fulfillment tracker that is as detailed as the ordering tracker. We are not always as good about updating that, but it does help us see what we've been getting, since it can take a while to reach the shelves. Marketing the collection to users is useful. So we've done blog posts, we've done pop-up libraries. We sometimes bring them to events or include them in exhibits. And I think this was a note that belonged somewhere else, but I guess the other tip, which we can reiterate, is you can look at creator information when choosing to back a project about whether they back other projects, if it's their first thing. For some of them, I think we had an image earlier, some of them are major publishers where it's obviously going to come out later. So if they're already an experienced publisher, maybe it's worth waiting. Next slide. Okay, so what happens after all that? You've started the collection, you're ordering things. What happens if you're late to the party and you miss a pledge window, which does happen from time to time? You can contact creators and ask if they have extra copies to sell. Some have generously donated their materials to libraries. Actually, it's really sweet. A lot of creators are really it's maybe aligned with the naivety of saying we'll just donate to any library, but a lot of people are really touched by the idea, especially new creators of libraries wanting to have holdings of their materials. I like it when we can pay them because art is work, it is labor. Some popular materials get picked up by mainstream publishers, so you can get them later that way. And then sometimes late pledges are available, so it's always worth checking back. Next slide. So some other sort of considerations or logistical things for starting your own crowdfunded comics collection. This is basically things that would be helpful to know apart from just my random collection of tips. Understand the logistics and process of crowdfunding campaigns, knowing about things like the time to fulfillment, the time window that campaigns might be available, how add-ons might work. Just understanding how all of those things work will be very useful. Determine how your library will purchase and process titles. Maybe you don't need a third-party vendor. Maybe you're one of the lucky people that has an institutional credit card and you don't have any restrictions on how you have to use it. But make a deliberate plan on how you're going to purchase and then process these things. Know how to find and assess relevant crowdfunding campaigns and projects. So not just how to navigate the pages, but what kinds of things you're looking for to assess whether a campaign fits into your collection goals. Know which comics will be available through other platforms or sources later. Sometimes it's really obvious. For example, again, we have the image of a new Tilly Walden graphic novel. We know that that's going to be available later, or there are others that it's pretty obvious they're major publishers. They're just kind of using crowdfunding as a bit of a pre-order stand-in. And then know about extras only available through crowdfunding campaigns. Caveat, also know what to do with the extras if they might not fit neatly into existing collection categories. But they might be something that has really interesting research value. And if your library is able to make those available, it could be really important to scholars. Next slide. So in conclusion, bringing the two pieces together, the study underpinning it, and then what happened at the University of Illinois after the study. Our study showed that libraries were under collecting crowdfunded comics, and that is slowly changing, not just at the University of Illinois, but other institutions. That said, more libraries should collect crowdfunded comics, and we can coordinate on building a strong international collection. One thing I will say is that it's important to consider access, not just having the things. So advocating with your library with policies about interlibrary loan can be really helpful. So for example, with the South Asian comic collection, as well as a crowdfunded, especially the ones where they end up in kind of our rare offsite storage, we have a special override where certain categories of materials that would not otherwise be lendable, we mandate that we will lend them to places when it comes to some of our rarely held comics. So that might be a possibility for you, depending on your relationship with the folks that make those decisions. And then I'm just going to give an early shout out. The Comic Studies Society's Research Librarians cohort is working on a notable collections project. There's going to be a form to collect information if you have unique or distinctive comics collections. Hopefully that will cross your radar even if you're not part of the research librarian cohort. But when it does come out, we really hope that everyone will participate so we can increase access to crowdfunded and other types of collections. Next slide. So for the reading, we have the book chapter that we mentioned that's got the research project. Matthew very helpfully put it in this PDF and audio version as well in the CU Scholar repository. And then for more of the nitty-gritty details on how the University of Illinois pilot collection started, you can also see that article in the Art Libraries Journal. It is open access. And if for some reason that doesn't work for you, email me and I will get you a copy. Next slide. So this is the end with a gratuitous picture of my dogs as unicorns. This is various ways to contact me and Matthew as well. So we can open the floor up for questions while we're both here, but we also hope you will feel comfortable to follow up with us after this instance.
As we're waiting for questions, I'll mention two other things that are worth considering. One is, what format are you collecting for your library? Because often you're getting hardback comics, paperback comics, single issue comics, and knowing what exactly you're collecting is really important for like with what falls within your scope when you're starting a collection like this. And being able to look at the projects and say, okay, we want to back this at the hardcover level. So that we have a long-term version of this, and then hoping, fingers crossed, that the hardcover is the better quality version, because you don't always know. The other thing that's worth considering is often you'll see that there will be something like a thank you page in the back of these comics. And what does it mean for your library to be listed on that thank you page is something that is worth considering. Because, you know, we're not always buying comics that have, or any material that have ideals and things that the library supports. You might be buying stuff that you're like, okay, we want to get this for our collection because we think it's important for academics or whoever to have access to this, but we don't think this is a good position, and we don't want to be seen as supporting this, as being listed as a supporter in the back of the book. And what does that mean when you're choosing projects to back?
That just reminds me of one of the early crowdfunded ones we got, which was Gandhi, the Beast Within, which has a very irreverent take on Mahatma Gandhi. There's some busty babes and other things, and luckily we didn't have to contend with the question of whether we'd be listed, but there's some really cool, funny, and interesting materials that come in, and I could see that potentially raising issues.
I'm thinking specifically of the Comicsgate titles
Yes.
that are not by good people. And it's like, do you want to have your library's name in the back of one of those things? Even if you're like, we're specifically collecting this material because we think it is important to like the comics community, comics researchers to have access to this material, but that's very different from saying we're a supporter of this material.
Yes.
Well, I will step in while we have a moment to say thank you, both Matthew and Mara, for lending your time and your expertise to explaining this topic. I know it's one that has been in discussion in comics, in the comics community for a while now, so we're happy to finally have some guidance into the discussion. I will give just another moment for questions to trickle in before I stop the recording. But again, thank you guys both so much.
And the slides will be available as well for people. So those links, you'll actually be able to follow them.